Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 1. The Melody Beyond the Hills. The morning road welcomed Ethan with quiet kindness. Behind him, far beyond the rolling green hills, the lighthouse had already disappeared from sight. Yet somehow, it never truly felt far away. The lessons he had gathered there still rested gently inside him, not as heavy memories, but as quiet companions. The sea breeze had slowly transformed into the sweet fragrance of apple blossoms. The salty air was gone. Now the wind carried hints of warm grass, fresher, and distant orchards waking beneath the golden sun. The narrow road curved softly through the valley. Ancient stone fences lined both sides. Wild daisies nodded peacefully whenever the breeze wandered past. A pair of rabbits paused beside a blackberry bush. They watched Ethan with curious eyes. For a single peaceful moment, neither traveler nor creatures felt the need to hurry. Then, the rabbits quietly disappeared into the tall grass. Ethan smiled. Some meetings lasted only seconds, yet still left warmth behind. He continued walking. His boots made soft sounds upon the old country road. Step, step, step. The rhythm blended naturally with the peaceful morning. Somewhere above, a skylark welcomed the new day with a cheerful song. The valley slowly widened. Rows of apple trees stretched across the hills like gentle waves of green. Their branches bent beneath small golden fruit. The sunlight slipped between the leaves. Tiny circles of dancing light covered the path. Ethan paused beneath one old apple tree. Its trunk was wide. Its bark carried countless seasons within its gentle cracks. Someone had carved a tiny sentence into a smooth wooden sign hanging from one branch. It read, "Every tree remembers every spring." Ethan rested his fingers against the rough bark. He wondered, could hearts remember healing the same way, even after difficult winters? The thought stayed with him as he resumed walking. The valley grew quieter, not empty, simply peaceful, the kind of silence that invited listening. Then, it returned, softly, almost too gently to notice. A single violin note floated through the morning air. Long, warm, tender. It drifted across the orchards like sunlight crossing still water. Ethan stopped immediately. The note faded. Silence returned. Then another, higher this time, gentle enough to calm even restless thoughts. He closed his eyes. The melody carried no sadness, yet it somehow understood sadness. It carried no joy alone, yet it gently welcomed joy as well. It felt honest, as though someone had placed years of quiet living into every note. The breeze shifted. The music drifted again, not from ahead, not exactly behind, but somewhere deeper inside the valley, hidden among the orchards, almost inviting, yet never demanding to be followed. Ethan opened his eyes. A peaceful smile appeared on his face. Some roads were discovered with maps, others with listening. He adjusted the straps of his backpack. Inside rested every treasure from his previous journey: the smooth river stone, the white seashell, the pressed lavender blossom, the tiny wooden windmill, the bottle of spring water, the cedar bookmark engraved with. Walk gently, listen deeply, the bronze key of quiet hearts, the morning bell, the silver bell bracelet, the golden ribbon, the wooden tree token, the journey bundle, the wildflower seed, the compass that pointed toward kindness, the blue sea glass, the amber sea glass, the bottle of white sand, Sophie's little paper boat, Captain's white feather, the silver compass that pointed to the center. None of them made a sound. Yet somehow, the violin seemed to greet every one of them, as though each small keepsake already knew. Another lesson was waiting. The road narrowed once more. Soon Ethan noticed something unusual. Dozens of tiny wooden birds hung from the branches of the apple trees. Each one had been carefully carved by hand. Each carried different wings, different expressions, different songs imagined within silent wood. Whenever the breeze passed, they gently turned together, not like wind chimes, simply watching, listening, waiting. At the foot of one tree rested a weathered wooden bench. Beside it stood another hand-painted sign. Its letters had faded with time, but they remained easy enough to read. If your heart feels heavy, sit for a while. The music always finds those who are willing to listen. Ethan quietly sat down. He wasn't tired. He simply felt invited. The bench was warm from the morning sun. A butterfly landed upon the sleeve of his coat. Its pale blue wings opened, closed, opened again, without fear, as though it had mistaken Ethan for another peaceful tree. Then, far across the valley, the violin began once more. This time, the melody unfolded slowly, one careful note after another, like someone patiently repairing something invisible. Not wood, not strings, something much deeper. Ethan listened without moving. The music spoke no words. Yet somehow, it whispered, "Keep walking." The butterfly lifted into the air. The breeze gently turned the wooden birds. Somewhere beyond the orchards, the unseen violin continued to sing. And for the very first time, Ethan felt that perhaps some songs were never written to be performed, only to help a tired heart remember how to become whole again. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 2. The Orchard That Remembered Every Song. The butterfly disappeared into the morning light. For a little while, Ethan remained seated beneath the old apple tree. The violin had fallen silent once more, not because the music had ended, but because silence was part of the melody. The valley breathed peacefully around him. Leaves shimmered beneath the warm sunlight. Somewhere nearby, bees drifted lazily from blossom to blossom. The sweet fragrance of apples mixed with wild rosemary growing along the stone walls. Everything seemed to move, without ever rushing. Ethan slowly stood. He brushed a few tiny petals from his coat. Then he smiled toward the little wooden sign beside the bench. The music always finds those who are willing to listen. He quietly repeated the words to himself. Sometimes, the smallest sentences stayed with a traveler the longest. The narrow path curved away from the main road. Unlike the worn country lane, this trail was covered with soft green moss. Old stepping stones disappeared beneath patches of tiny white flowers. Someone clearly cared for the path, yet no footprints disturbed the morning dew. Only birds had walked here. Tiny feathered tracks crossed the stones like delicate handwriting. Ethan followed, not because he wished to discover a destination, but because the melody had awakened a quiet curiosity inside him. As the orchard deepened, the trees became older. Their branches twisted gently toward the sky. Some trunks were so wide, it would have taken 3 people holding hands to circle them. Small wooden plaques rested beneath many of the trees. Each carried a single name: Emma, Oliver, Rose, Daniel, Martha, No dates, no explanations, only names. Ethan knelt beside one plaque. The wood had been polished smooth by years of gentle care. Someone visited these trees often. Someone remembered. A robin landed upon the plaque. It tilted its tiny head toward Ethan, then sang 3 bright notes before flying deeper into the orchard. The melody sounded strangely familiar, almost as though it had borrowed those notes from the distant violin. Ethan continued walking. Soon he reached a small wooden bridge crossing a quiet stream. The water flowed slowly over smooth stones. Crystal clear, tiny silver fish glided peacefully beneath the surface. On the center railing rested another carved message. Every heart leaves an echo. Ethan placed both hands upon the old wood. He looked down into the moving water. His reflection trembled gently, then settled once more. He wondered if kindness echoed the same way. Perhaps a gentle word continued traveling long after it had been spoken, like circles spreading across still water, never truly disappearing, only growing wider. A soft breeze crossed the bridge. The leaves whispered together. Then, very faintly, the violin returned. This time, the melody felt closer. Not loud, never loud, simply nearer. One graceful note lingered in the air, followed by another, and another. Each one carried extraordinary patience, as though the musician cared less about finishing the song, and more about allowing every note to breathe. Ethan closed his eyes. He noticed something he had missed before. Between the violin notes, he could hear another sound, the gentle scrape of a craftsman's tools, wood being carefully shaped, not hurriedly, lovingly. The soft rhythm blended perfectly with the music. Music and craftsmanship, song and silence, creation and care. When Ethan opened his eyes again, he saw something standing beyond the bridge. A young deer. Its coat glowed softly beneath the morning sun. The graceful animal watched him without fear. Around its neck hung a narrow blue ribbon. Old, slightly faded, yet neatly tied. The deer blinked once, then quietly turned. It walked a few steps along the moss-covered path. Stopped, looked back, as if checking whether Ethan still followed. Ethan smiled. "You know where the music lives," he whispered. The deer said nothing. Of course, some guides never needed words. It continued walking at its own peaceful pace, never running, never urging, simply trusting that those who wished to follow would. The orchard slowly opened into a wide meadow. Golden grass swayed like gentle waves beneath the wind. Wildflowers painted the earth with quiet colors. Lavender, bluebells, white daisies, golden buttercups. In the very center stood an enormous apple tree unlike any Ethan had ever seen. Its branches stretched outward like welcoming arms. Hundreds of tiny ribbons fluttered among its leaves. Blue, white, silver, golden. Each ribbon carried a handwritten name. The breeze stirred them gently. They danced together, without making a sound. At the foot of the great tree rested a small wooden box. Its lid stood open. Inside lay neatly folded ribbons waiting for future visitors. Beside it rested a handwritten note. If someone has ever filled your life with kindness, write their name. Tie a ribbon to the branches. The tree remembers gratitude, and grateful hearts never lose their way. Ethan stood quietly before the ancient tree. He thought of Elias, Grace, Thomas, Sophie, Captain, the lighthouse. Every quiet soul who had gently changed his journey. A warm smile touched his face. He reached toward the empty ribbons, then paused. Not yet, he whispered softly. I think I still have more people to thank. The breeze answered by lifting the ribbons into a peaceful dance. Far beyond the meadow, the violins sang again, closer than ever. Somewhere beyond the next hill, someone waited, not expecting visitors, not seeking applause, simply allowing broken songs to find their way home. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 3. The Cottage Where Violins Slept. The meadow slowly disappeared behind Ethan. The ribbons upon the great apple tree continued dancing peacefully in the morning breeze. Ahead, the valley narrowed once again. The violin never hurried. Its melody drifted between the hills like a friendly hand reaching through the silence. Sometimes, only a single note appeared. Then, several long moments passed before the next one arrived. The pauses felt just as important as the music itself. Ethan followed the winding footpath. Wild thyme grew between the stones beneath his boots. Its gentle fragrance rose into the cool air whenever he stepped forward. Butterflies wandered from flower to flower. A family of sparrows gathered along an old stone wall. None of them seemed disturbed by the unseen musician, almost as though this melody had always belonged here. The path climbed gently toward a small hill. When Ethan reached its crest, he stopped. Below him rested the most peaceful little village he had ever seen. Only a handful of cottages stood among endless orchards. Each roof was covered with weathered slate. White smoke curled lazily from old chimneys. Flower gardens surrounded every doorway. Children's laughter was absent. So were busy markets. The village felt wonderfully quiet, not lonely, simply unhurried. Near the center stood a tiny stone fountain. Fresh spring water flowed continuously into a round basin where several birds happily bathed. Above the fountain, someone had carved another simple message. Kindness is heard long after words become quiet. Ethan smiled softly. Every place seemed to speak with gentle wisdom. The violin echoed once more. Closer now, much closer. Its sound drifted from the far edge of the village where the orchards met a peaceful woodland. There, partly hidden beneath climbing roses, stood a small wooden cottage. Its walls had faded beneath many seasons of sunshine and rain. Blue shutters framed every window. Colorful flower boxes overflowed beneath them. An old pear tree leaned protectively across the roof. What caught Ethan's attention most was the front porch. Dozens of violins rested there. Some hung carefully upon wooden hooks. Some lay inside open cases lined with soft velvet. Others waited upon a long workbench beneath the shade. None appeared abandoned. Each seemed to be resting, as though every instrument had been given permission to breathe before singing again. The music stopped. Silence returned. Then, the cottage door opened. An elderly man stepped quietly outside. His silver hair reached almost to his shoulders. Round spectacles rested gently upon his nose. He wore a simple linen apron covered with tiny curls of fresh wood. In one hand, he carried a small carving knife. In the other, an unfinished violin. He did not appear surprised to see Ethan. Instead, he smiled the way old friends often smile after many years apart. Warmly, patiently, without asking questions. The old craftsman gently placed the unfinished violin upon the workbench, then brushed away a few curls of cedar from the wooden surface. Only after everything had been carefully arranged did he finally speak. "Good morning." His voice was quiet, almost musical itself. I wondered how long it would take before the melody reached you. Ethan blinked gently. "You knew someone was coming?" The old man chuckled softly. "No." He looked toward the orchards. "I simply trusted that every song eventually finds the heart meant to hear it." The breeze carried the scent of cedar wood across the garden. It reminded Ethan of the bookmark Elias had once given him. "Walk gently. Listen deeply." The words suddenly felt alive once more. The craftsman rested one gentle hand upon the unfinished violin. "You've traveled a long way. I can see it." Ethan looked surprised. "My backpack gave it away." The old man smiled. "No, your eyes did. They belong to someone who has learned many beautiful lessons and is still humble enough to keep learning." For a quiet moment, neither of them spoke. Some conversations never begin with words. Sometimes they begin with understanding. Then Ethan noticed something unusual inside the open workshop. Rows upon rows of violins rested peacefully upon wooden shelves. Some looked brand new. Others were worn smooth by generations of careful hands. Several carried tiny repaired cracks that glowed softly beneath fresh varnish. None had been hidden. None had been discarded. Every repaired instrument stood proudly beside the others. The old craftsman followed Ethan's gaze. He smiled again. People often believe broken things belong out of sight. He gently lifted one beautifully repaired violin. "I've never agreed." He ran his fingers lightly across its polished surface. "The cracks remind us where the light first learned to enter." The valley breeze became wonderfully still. Somewhere high above, a single skylark sang into the bright blue sky, and Ethan quietly realized he had finally found the violin maker. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 4. The First Broken Violin. The old violin maker held the instrument with both hands. Not tightly, not loosely, but with the quiet care one might offer a sleeping bird. Morning sunlight slipped through the climbing roses. Golden patterns rested across the polished wood. For several peaceful moments, neither Ethan nor the old craftsman spoke. The silence never felt empty. It simply gave the music room to breathe. At last, the violin maker smiled. "My name is Gabriel." His voice carried the same calm rhythm as the melody Ethan had followed through the valley. Ethan placed his hand over his heart. "I'm Ethan." Gabriel nodded gently. "I know." Ethan looked surprised. "You do?" The old man chuckled softly. "The valley listens. The wind carries stories. And travelers who walk kindly are remembered long before they arrive." He carefully returned the repaired violin to its place upon the wooden shelf. Each instrument rested with enough space to breathe. Nothing was crowded. Nothing was hurried. Everything seemed to belong exactly where it was. A tiny gray cat stretched lazily beneath the workbench. It opened one sleepy eye, looked at Ethan for a moment, then curled back into a peaceful nap. Gabriel smiled. "That is Willow. She believes every visitor comes here to admire her." Almost as if she understood, the little cat flicked her tail once. Ethan laughed quietly. "So she welcomes everyone?" Gabriel nodded. "In her own peaceful way." The old craftsman slowly walked toward the long workbench. Neatly arranged across its surface rested small carving knives, gentle brushes, tiny bottles of warm amber varnish, delicate clamps, and smooth pieces of maple and spruce waiting patiently to become music. No tool appeared worn carelessly. Each had been cleaned, returned, thanked through quiet attention. Gabriel noticed Ethan looking. My grandfather taught me. Every tool remembers the hands that use it. If we care for our tools, they quietly teach us to care for people. Ethan ran his fingers gently across the edge of the workbench. The cedar carried a comforting fragrance. It reminded him once again of the lighthouse. Some lessons, he realized, never truly stayed behind. A robin landed upon the windowsill. It sang 3 cheerful notes. Gabriel answered with 3 soft whistles. The bird tilted its head, then happily flew away. You speak with birds? Ethan asked. Gabriel smiled warmly. No, I simply greet old friends. Outside, the orchard shimmered beneath the gentle breeze. Hundreds of apple leaves danced together like tiny green waves. Then, a slow knock echoed across the little garden. Knock, knock, knock. Not hurried, not uncertain, simply patient. Gabriel looked toward the wooden gate. Come in. The gate opened quietly. An elderly woman stepped inside. She wore a pale blue shawl over a simple linen dress. Her silver hair had been gathered neatly beneath a woven straw hat. In her hands rested an old violin case. She carried it carefully, almost reverently, as though protecting something precious. Yet Ethan noticed. The woman herself seemed much heavier than the case. Not in body, in heart. Gabriel walked toward her with a gentle smile. Good morning, Eleanor. She returned the smile, though sadness still rested softly behind her eyes. Good morning, Gabriel. I hope I'm not too early. You are exactly on time. He opened the little garden gate for her. Willow the cat wandered over without hesitation. She gently brushed against Eleanor's ankles. The woman smiled for the very first time. You always remember me, don't you? Willow answered with a quiet purr. Gabriel carefully accepted the violin case. He did not open it immediately. Instead, he invited Eleanor to sit beneath the pear tree. A small wooden table already held a teapot, 3 cups, fresh mint leaves, and warm apple bread wrapped inside a clean linen cloth. You always prepare for visitors? Ethan asked. Gabriel poured the tea slowly. I prepare for possibilities. The difference is important. Steam curled peacefully into the cool morning air. The scent of mint drifted through the garden. For several minutes, no one mentioned the violin. They simply shared warm tea, fresh bread, and gentle silence. Finally, Eleanor rested one hand upon the old violin case. It has been 12 years. She whispered, I still haven't found the courage to open it. Gabriel nodded. I know. She lowered her eyes. My husband played it every evening. After he was gone, I closed the case, and I never opened it again. The garden became wonderfully still. Even the breeze seemed to soften. Gabriel placed one comforting hand over the worn leather case, then looked toward Ethan. My young friend, he said quietly, today, you will discover that not every broken violin has a broken string. Ethan listened carefully, because somehow, he already knew. Gabriel wasn't speaking only about the instrument. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 5. The Song Hidden Inside Silence. The morning sunlight drifted gently through the branches of the old pear tree. Small circles of golden light rested upon the weathered table. The teacups gave off soft curls of warm steam. No one reached for the violin case. Not yet. Gabriel simply sat beside Eleanor, patiently, without asking her to speak, without asking her to remember. Sometimes, the greatest kindness was allowing another heart to arrive in its own time. The garden settled into its peaceful rhythm. Bees wandered through the lavender. Willows slept beneath the table. A breeze stirred the climbing roses. Somewhere beyond the orchard, a robin welcomed the morning. Ethan wrapped both hands around his teacup. The warmth felt comforting. He had learned many lessons during his travels. Yet today, he sensed another one quietly waiting. Not to be taught, but to be discovered. At last, Eleanor took a slow breath. "My husband," she began softly, "never believed music belonged on grand stages." Gabriel smiled. No, he believed it belonged wherever a lonely heart happened to be. A gentle laugh escaped Eleanor. He played for neighbors, for children, for travelers, for anyone who needed hope. She looked toward the old violin case. He even played for the birds. As if on cue, several sparrows landed upon the garden fence. They chirped cheerfully before fluttering away again. Ethan couldn't help smiling. Perhaps the birds truly had remembered. Eleanor rested her fingertips upon the worn leather. The evening before he became ill, he played one final melody. I didn't know it would be the last. Her voice grew quieter, so when he was gone, I closed the case. I thought, if I never opened it again, the music would stay exactly as I remembered. The breeze carried a few apple blossoms across the garden. One landed softly upon the violin case. Gabriel did not move it. Instead, he watched it with gentle understanding. "Memory is a beautiful garden," he said, "but even gardens need sunlight." Eleanor looked toward him. I was afraid. I know. I thought, if I heard the violin again, it would remind me of losing him. Gabriel nodded slowly. "And did silence protect you?" Eleanor lowered her eyes. After a long pause, she whispered, "No." The silence only grew louder. No one answered immediately. Some truths needed no reply. They simply needed someone willing to hear them. Gabriel reached into the pocket of his linen apron. From it, he carefully removed a tiny wooden music box. It was simple, hand-carved from maple, no larger than the palm of his hand. Years of careful use had polished its edges smooth. He placed it gently upon the table. "My grandfather made this," he said, "when I was a little boy." I asked him why it stopped playing. Ethan leaned forward. Gabriel smiled at the memory. He told me, "Music never disappears. It simply waits until someone is ready to listen again." With great care, Gabriel turned the small brass key. The music box began to play. Its melody was soft, delicate, almost like a lullaby carried by the wind. No violin, no grand orchestra, only tiny silver notes floating through the peaceful garden. Willow slowly lifted her head. The sparrows returned to the fence. Even the breeze seemed to slow, as though it wished to listen too. When the melody ended, silence returned, but something had changed. The silence no longer felt heavy. It felt gentle, like a blanket laid carefully across tired shoulders. Gabriel looked kindly at Eleanor. You see, the silence isn't empty. It's simply holding the last note. Ethan quietly repeated the words inside his heart. The last note. Perhaps that was why silence after beautiful music always felt different. Not lonely, only full. Full of echoes, full of gratitude, full of love that had nowhere left to rush. Eleanor closed her eyes. A peaceful tear slipped quietly down her cheek. Not a tear of sorrow alone, but of remembrance, of gratitude, of love that had never truly left. After a few moments, she opened her eyes again. Then, for the first time in 12 years, she slowly unfastened the small brass clasps on the violin case. Click, click. The old leather lid rose only an inch. She paused, took another gentle breath, then opened it completely. Inside rested a beautiful violin. Its amber wood still shimmered beneath the soft morning light. The strings remained intact. The bow rested exactly where it had been placed years before. No cracks, no broken bridge, no missing pieces. It had waited, as faithfully as time itself. Gabriel looked at Ethan, then quietly said, "Sometimes, the instrument is perfectly whole. It's the heart that believes it has forgotten how to sing." The orchard became wonderfully still. Far above, a skylark began another gentle morning song. And somewhere deep inside Ethan, another quiet lesson found its place. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 6. When the violin sang again. The violin rested quietly inside its open case. Golden morning light flowed across its polished surface. For 12 long years, it had waited, not forgotten, simply waiting. The maple wood still carried a warm amber glow. The ebony fingerboard had been gently polished by countless evenings of faithful practice. Even the bough, resting peacefully beside it, seemed to remember the hands that had once guided it. No one reached for the instrument. Not yet. Gabriel believed beautiful moments should never be hurried. Instead, he poured a little more tea into Eleanor's cup. The steam rose slowly between them. Warm, comforting, patient. Eleanor looked at the violin for a long while. "I thought," she whispered, "opening the case would bring only sadness." Gabriel smiled softly. And what did it bring instead? She thought carefully before answering. A memory. She paused. Not of the day I lost him, but of all the evenings we shared before that. A peaceful breeze wandered through the garden. The climbing roses swayed gently. Somewhere nearby, the fountain continued its endless song. Water, stone, birdsong, wind. Every sound belonged exactly where it was. Ethan quietly listened. He realized memories were much like rivers. When blocked, they became still, heavy, but when allowed to flow, they often carried healing with them. Gabriel slowly stood. He washed his hands in a small porcelain bowl resting beside the workbench, then carefully dried them with a clean linen cloth. Every movement was unhurried, almost ceremonial. Finally, he returned to the table. With both hands, he gently lifted the violin from its case, not as a craftsman examining an object, but as an old friend greeting another. He studied it beneath the sunlight, turning it slowly, looking closely along its graceful curves. The varnish remained beautiful. The bridge stood straight. The pegs rested firmly. The strings had aged, but they still held their quiet promise. Gabriel smiled. She has cared for it well. Ethan noticed something curious. "You called it she." Gabriel nodded. Every violin has its own voice, and every voice has its own personality. He gently touched the scroll at the top. This one has always sounded gentle, even when she sings loudly. Ethan couldn't help smiling. The old craftsman spoke of instruments, the way gardeners spoke of flowers, or lighthouse keepers spoke of the sea, with affection, respect, and quiet understanding. Gabriel picked up the bough. Fresh horsehair gleamed softly beneath the morning light. He reached for a small block of amber rosin. Slowly, patiently, he brushed it along the bough. Once, twice, 3 times. The faint scent of pine filled the air. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was rushed. Every small act prepared the way for something beautiful. He handed the violin toward Eleanor. She looked startled. I don't know if I can." Gabriel's smile never faded. "You don't have to perform. You don't have to play perfectly. You only have to let the first note come home." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. Very carefully, she accepted the instrument. For a long moment, she simply held it, as though greeting an old friend after many years apart. Her fingers rested naturally upon the neck. Muscle memory, sleeping quietly all these years, began to awaken. She raised the violin slowly beneath her chin. The garden became perfectly still. Even Willow opened sleepy eyes beneath the table. The sparrows gathered silently along the fence. The breeze itself seemed to pause. Eleanor lifted the bough. She hesitated, closed her eyes. Then, the first note appeared. It was not perfect. It trembled, barely louder than a whisper, yet it carried something no flawless performance ever could. Courage. Another note followed, then another, each one steadier than the last. The melody unfolded slowly. Simple, gentle, deeply familiar. Tears quietly filled Eleanor's eyes, but her hands no longer trembled. The violin remembered, and perhaps so did her heart. Gabriel lowered his head, not out of sadness, but gratitude. Ethan listened without moving. He felt as though the music was mending something invisible inside the morning itself. The apple trees swayed gently. The ribbons beneath the great tree fluttered across the distant meadow. A robin answered with a cheerful song. The little fountain continued its peaceful rhythm. Nothing interrupted the melody. Everything welcomed it. When the final note faded, silence returned once more. But now, it felt different. Not empty, not lonely. It felt complete. Eleanor slowly lowered the violin. A quiet smile rested upon her face. The kind of smile that appears, not when pain disappears, but when hope gently returns. She looked toward Gabriel. "I thought I had lost his music." Gabriel shook his head softly. "No, you were simply carrying it in silence." A single tear slipped down Ethan's cheek. He did not wipe it away. Some tears were not signs of sorrow. They were quiet reminders that healing often arrived, one gentle note at a time. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 7. The Boy Who Believed His Song Was Gone. The final note lingered softly beneath the old pear tree. No one hurried to speak. The silence that followed the melody felt warm, like the last golden light of an autumn afternoon. Eleanor gently lowered the violin into her lap. For the first time in many years, her shoulders seemed lighter, not because every sorrow had disappeared, but because she no longer carried it alone. Gabriel quietly placed another piece of warm apple bread onto her plate. He did not offer congratulations. He did not praise the performance. Instead, he simply smiled. "Welcome back." Eleanor smiled through peaceful tears. I didn't realize how much I had missed hearing him. Gabriel shook his head gently. You weren't hearing only him. You were hearing yourself again. The words settled into the garden like falling petals. Ethan quietly repeated them inside his heart. Sometimes, the longest journey wasn't across mountains or seas. It was the journey back to ourselves. The old violin maker carefully returned the instrument to its case. This time, the lid remained open. Eleanor noticed. You weren't closing it. Gabriel smiled. Some doors are happier left open. She nodded. I think you're right. Willow the gray cat stretched lazily beneath the table. She wandered over to the open violin case. After sniffing it carefully, she curled herself beside it as if guarding an old treasure. Everyone laughed softly. Even the laughter seemed gentle enough not to disturb the peaceful morning. Then, another sound drifted through the orchard. Not the violin, not birdsong. Footsteps, small footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. A young boy slowly appeared through the garden gate, perhaps 10 years old. His brown hair was tousled by the breeze. A knitted satchel rested across one shoulder. His shoes were dusty from the orchard paths. Yet it wasn't his appearance that caught Ethan's attention. It was his expression. The boy carried the quiet look of someone who had stopped believing in himself. He hesitated near the gate, as though unsure whether he should come closer. Gabriel looked up and smiled warmly. Good morning, Oliver. The boy offered a shy wave. Good morning, Mr. Gabriel. His voice was barely louder than the wind. Gabriel walked toward him, never too quickly, never too slowly, just enough to let the child know. There was no need to be afraid. What brings you here today? Oliver lowered his eyes. From inside his satchel, he carefully removed a very small violin. It was built for a child. Its polished wood still gleamed beautifully, yet one of its strings hung loose. Broken. He whispered. I think it doesn't want to sing anymore. Gabriel knelt until they were at the same height. He accepted the little violin with both hands, then smiled kindly. It isn't the violin that's worried. Oliver looked confused. It isn't. Gabriel gently shook his head. No, I think. He looked into the boy's eyes. Its player has forgotten how brave he really is. Oliver's cheeks turned slightly pink. I made too many mistakes, he admitted quietly. At the village recital, I played the wrong notes. Everyone heard. I couldn't finish. The orchard grew wonderfully still. Ethan remembered moments from his own journey. Times when he believed he had failed. Times when kindness from others had quietly helped him continue. Gabriel rested one comforting hand upon Oliver's shoulder. Do you know something curious about music? Oliver slowly shook his head. Gabriel smiled. The wrong note is never the end of the song. The little boy looked up. It isn't. No, it's simply an invitation to find the next right one. A gentle breeze wandered through the garden. The apple blossoms danced overhead. Gabriel carefully examined the broken string. It can easily be replaced. Oliver sighed softly. I knew that. Gabriel nodded. But I don't think that's the part you're truly worried about. The boy remained silent. His eyes slowly filled with tears. I was afraid, he whispered, that everyone would remember my mistake. Gabriel looked toward the orchard. Come with me. Together, Gabriel, Ethan, Oliver, and Eleanor walked to the great apple tree standing beyond the meadow. The hundreds of ribbons fluttered peacefully among its branches. Gabriel pointed toward one faded blue ribbon near the very top. Do you see that one? Oliver nodded. A little. It belongs to a young woman who once believed she would never sing again. He pointed toward another silver ribbon. That one belongs to a traveler who forgave himself after many difficult years. Then another, and that golden ribbon belongs to someone who discovered courage after failing many times. Oliver looked around in amazement. So many people. Gabriel smiled. Every ribbon carries a story. But do you know something wonderful? Oliver shook his head. No ribbon remembers the mistake. They remember the courage that came after. The boy looked up into the dancing branches. His frightened expression slowly softened. Perhaps, for the very first time since the recital, he believed that one wrong note did not have to become the end of his story. Far above the orchard, a skylark lifted into the bright blue sky. Its song wasn't perfect. It skipped one tiny note before continuing. Yet somehow, it sounded even more beautiful because it kept singing. And Ethan quietly realized, perhaps hearts were not meant to be flawless. They were simply meant to keep making music. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 8. The Concert Beneath the Apple Tree. The skylark's song slowly disappeared into the bright morning sky. Its tiny mistake, already forgotten. Its beautiful melody, still remembered. Oliver continued looking up into the branches of the great apple tree. Hundreds of ribbons danced gently above him. Blue, silver, white, golden. Each ribbon whispered softly whenever the breeze wandered through the valley. Ethan stood quietly beside him. He remembered the words written on the wooden box. The tree remembers gratitude. Perhaps it remembered courage as well. Gabriel rested one gentle hand upon Oliver's shoulder. Would you help me with something? The boy looked up. Me? Yes. I have a concert to prepare. Oliver glanced around the peaceful meadow. There isn't anyone here. Gabriel's eyes sparkled kindly. He slowly pointed around them. The apple trees, the birds, the butterflies, the wind, the stream. Then he smiled, and 3 grateful hearts. I think that's a wonderful audience. Oliver couldn't help smiling. It was small, almost shy, but it was there. For the first time that morning, hope quietly appeared in his eyes. Together they returned to the cottage. Gabriel placed Oliver's little violin upon the workbench. He selected a fresh string from a neatly arranged wooden drawer. Every string was carefully wrapped in soft paper. Each carried a handwritten note. Handle with patience. Ethan noticed. Even the strings have reminders. Gabriel chuckled. They're mostly for me. He gently removed the broken string. Then, with slow and practiced movements, he threaded the new one through the peg. He turned it only a little, never tightening too quickly. The wood needs time to greet the new string. He said softly, if we rush, something beautiful may become something strange. Ethan watched every movement. Repairing a violin was not very different from rebuilding trust. Neither could be forced. Both required patience. When the string was finally in place, Gabriel drew the bow gently across it. A single clear note floated into the garden. Bright, warm, alive. Oliver's eyes widened. It sounds like itself again. Gabriel smiled. It always was itself. It simply needed one small part restored. The old craftsman carefully handed the violin back. This time, I think it would like to hear your voice. Oliver hesitated. What if I make another mistake? Gabriel looked toward the orchard. Then the birds will keep singing. The trees will keep growing. And we'll simply play the next note. Eleanor smiled warmly. I've made many mistakes. So have I. Ethan nodded. I've taken wrong roads. Gabriel laughed softly. I once carved an entire violin upside down. Everyone looked at him in surprise. You did. He nodded with a grin. When I was 17, it became a very expensive firewood lesson. Oliver burst into laughter. Real laughter. Bright. Free. The kind that chased away fear. Even Willow opened one sleepy eye, as though wondering what all the happiness was about. Gabriel picked up his own violin. Its polished wood reflected the dancing sunlight. He looked at Oliver. I'll play beside you. You'll never be alone. The little boy took a slow breath. He placed the violin beneath his chin. His hands trembled only a little now. Gabriel nodded once. No countdown. No pressure. Simply an invitation. Oliver played the first note. Soft. Steady. True. Gabriel answered with another. Then another. The two melodies slowly wove together. Not competing. Not leading. Simply walking beside one another. The breeze carried the music across the valley. The apple blossoms swayed gently. A robin landed on the garden fence. Then another. Soon, dozens of little birds gathered nearby. None seemed frightened. Instead, they listened. The butterflies drifted lazily through the warm air. Even the old fountain seemed to keep time with its gentle rhythm. Oliver smiled while he played. One measure passed. Then another. His confidence quietly returned. Until one note squeaked unexpectedly. He froze. For just a heartbeat. The old fear returned. But before it could grow, Gabriel smiled. Without stopping, he gently reshaped the melody around that imperfect note. It no longer sounded like a mistake. It sounded intentional. Oliver looked at him in amazement. Gabriel whispered while continuing to play. Music is kinder than we imagine. It knows how to make room. The boy took another breath, then continued, this time without fear. When the melody finally came to its peaceful end, no applause followed, only the soft rustling of apple leaves, the cheerful songs of waiting birds, and the quiet satisfaction that filled every heart in the garden. Gabriel lowered his violin. You see, Oliver nodded, smiling more brightly than ever before. I didn't play perfectly. No, Gabriel agreed. You played honestly. And honest music always reaches the heart. Ethan looked toward the distant hills, the same hills he had crossed that morning. He realized some journeys were never about reaching a place. They were about helping someone find the courage to keep playing their own song. Far beyond the orchard, the valley echoed with one last gentle note. It floated into the blue sky, as though carrying hope to every traveler, still searching for their own melody. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 9. The Violin That Refused to Be Sold. The last note drifted gently across the orchard. Then, like a leaf settling upon still water, it disappeared into the peaceful morning. Oliver lowered his little violin. This time, his smile remained, not because he had played without mistakes, But because he had discovered something far more important, he no longer feared them. Gabriel gave the young boy a warm nod. "I believe," he said softly. "Your violin has been waiting to hear that smile again." Oliver looked down at the little instrument. Very gently, he stroked its polished wood. "Thank you," he whispered. No one was quite sure whether he was thanking Gabriel, the violin, or perhaps both. Eleanor quietly closed the violin case she had opened that morning. Unlike before, she did not fasten the brass clasps. She simply rested one hand upon the lid, leaving it slightly open, as though inviting music to visit again. The breeze carried the scent of warm cedar through the little garden. Willows stretched beneath the workbench. The gray cat wandered over to Oliver. She rubbed against his leg before settling once more in a patch of sunlight. Oliver laughed. "I think she likes music." Gabriel smiled. "I think she likes peaceful hearts." Everyone chuckled softly. The morning felt lighter now, as though the valley itself had breathed a quiet sigh of contentment. Just then, the sound of wagon wheels rolled slowly along the orchard road. Creak, creak, creak. Not hurried, steady, patient. A small wooden cart appeared through the apple trees. An elderly gentleman guided the gentle chestnut horse pulling it. His clothes were neat but well worn. A wide straw hat shaded his kind face. In the back of the wagon rested several carefully wrapped wooden crates. When he reached the cottage gate, he removed his hat with a respectful smile. "Good morning, Gabriel." Gabriel returned the greeting warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Alden. It's been a while." "It has." The old merchant climbed down from the wagon. His movements were careful. Years had taught him not to rush. Ethan noticed that despite the merchant's friendly smile, his eyes carried quiet concern. Mr. Alden glanced toward the workshop shelves. His gaze lingered upon a particular violin hanging near the highest window. It was unlike the others. Its maple back shimmered with rich golden patterns. The scroll had been carved into the shape of a tiny olive branch. Its craftsmanship was extraordinary, almost breathtaking. "I've come again," Mr. Alden said gently, "to ask about that violin." Gabriel looked toward it, then smiled with familiar kindness. "I'm afraid my answer hasn't changed." The merchant sighed. "I thought perhaps this year might be different." Gabriel slowly shook his head. "No, the violin isn't waiting for money. It's waiting for someone." Ethan looked curiously toward the beautiful instrument. "You've never sold it?" Gabriel answered quietly. "Never." Mr. Alden smiled with gentle amusement. "I've offered enough gold over the years to build 3 new workshops." Gabriel chuckled. "I know, and I was grateful for every offer. But some things," he looked lovingly toward the violin, "cannot be measured by their price." Oliver stepped closer. Who was it waiting for? Gabriel folded his hands peacefully. "I don't know, but every instrument carries a story. This one hasn't finished telling its own." The merchant nodded slowly. "I've always admired that about you. You never build violins for the market." Gabriel smiled. "I build them for the moment they find their rightful home." A gentle breeze wandered through the open workshop. The hanging violins swayed almost imperceptibly. Soft beams of sunlight danced across their polished wood. Mr. Alden walked closer to the special violin. He never touched it. He simply admired it from where he stood. "It almost feels alive," he whispered. Gabriel's eyes twinkled kindly. "I hope every violin feels alive." They spend their whole lives carrying pieces of human hearts. The merchant stood quietly for a long moment. Then, with a peaceful smile, he reached into his coat pocket. From it, he removed a tiny carved wooden bird, no larger than Ethan's thumb. "I brought this for you," he said. "I carved it during the winter." Gabriel accepted the little bird with both hands. Its wings were slightly uneven. Its tail curved just a little to one side. Perfectly imperfect. "It's beautiful," Gabriel said sincerely. Mr. Alden laughed softly. "The wings aren't quite balanced." Gabriel gently turned the little carving beneath the sunlight. "Perhaps," he smiled, "but it still knows how to remind someone of flight." The old merchant's eyes grew warm. "You always notice the part worth keeping." Gabriel carefully placed the tiny bird upon a shelf beside several finished violins. Not hidden, displayed with quiet honor. Ethan watched everything in thoughtful silence. The violin maker never measured value by perfection, nor by rarity, nor by wealth, only by the love, the patience, and the hope something carried within it. Just then, a stronger breeze swept through the open windows. The hanging violin near the highest shelf moved ever so slightly. Only once. Its strings gave the faintest whisper. One soft note, almost too quiet to hear. Gabriel looked up. His peaceful smile deepened. "It seems," he murmured. "It's still waiting." Ethan followed his gaze. For reasons he could not explain, he felt the beautiful violin had not whispered to the wind. It had whispered to the future, and somewhere beyond today's peaceful morning, a new story was already preparing its first gentle note. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 10. The Letter Hidden Inside the Violin. The whispering note slowly faded into silence. For several peaceful moments, no one spoke. Even the breeze seemed content to let the quiet remain. Gabriel continued looking toward the violin hanging near the highest window, the one he had never sold, the one that seemed to be waiting. Mr. Alden gently placed his straw hat back upon his head. He smiled at Gabriel. "I suppose I'll ask again next year." Gabriel laughed softly. "And I'll probably give you the same answer." The two old friends shared a knowing smile. Some friendships needed very few words. Mr. Alden climbed back onto his wagon before gathering the reins. He looked at Ethan. "You've come a long way, haven't you?" Ethan nodded. "I'm still traveling." The merchant smiled warmly. "Good. Keep walking. The world has many beautiful people, but it hides most of them on quiet roads." With a gentle flick of the reins, the chestnut horse began walking once more. The wagon rolled slowly down the orchard path. Creak, 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 until both horse and driver disappeared among the apple trees. The garden returned to its peaceful rhythm. Oliver carefully packed away his little violin. This time, he closed the case with confidence, not fear. "I think," he said shyly, "I'll practice again tomorrow." Gabriel smiled. "I think your violin would like that very much." Eleanor stood beside him. "I'll listen." Oliver's face brightened. "Really?" She nodded. "And perhaps," she looked toward her own violin, "I'll play with you someday." The little boy grinned from ear to ear. "I'd like that." As the morning slowly drifted toward noon, the visitors gradually prepared to leave. Eleanor thanked Gabriel with a warm embrace. Oliver waved happily before skipping down the orchard path. His steps no longer carried hesitation. only quiet excitement. Soon, only Ethan, Gabriel, and Willow remain. The gray cat stretched beneath the workbench before wandering into the sunshine. She settled beneath a patch of lavender. Already half asleep again, Gabriel began tidying the workshop. Every tool returned to its familiar place. Every cloth folded neatly. Every shaving of cedar swept carefully into a wooden basket. Ethan offered to help. Gabriel nodded thankfully. Together, they worked without speaking. The gentle sounds of the workshop became their conversation. The brush, the broom, the creak of old floorboards, the distant song of birds. At last, only one task remained. Gabriel looked toward the violin hanging near the highest window. The old dust has gathered again. He smiled. I suppose we'd better greet an old friend. He carefully brought over a small wooden ladder. Step by step, he climbed upward. The sunlight pouring through the window wrapped around him like warm gold. Very gently, he lifted the violin from its hook. Its polished maple shimmered beautifully. Not a single crack marked its surface. It seemed untouched by time. As Gabriel slowly climbed back down, something unexpected happened. A tiny folded piece of yellowed paper slipped from inside the violin. It fluttered gently through the sunlight, like an autumn leaf, before landing softly upon the workshop floor. Ethan blinked. Gabriel looked surprised. I had forgotten, he whispered. He carefully picked up the fragile paper. Its edges had grown soft with age. The ink had faded slightly, yet the handwriting remained beautifully clear. Ethan looked at him. What is it? Gabriel smiled quietly. A letter. He gently unfolded it. It has been many years since I've seen this. He looked thoughtfully toward the violin. My father placed it inside, on the day we finished building this instrument. The workshop became wonderfully still. Outside, the wind stirred the apple branches. Inside, only the quiet rustle of old paper could be heard. Gabriel adjusted his spectacles, then began reading aloud. To the one who will someday hold this violin. If these words have found you, then so has hope. You may believe you chose this instrument, but perhaps it has quietly chosen you. Do not seek perfect music. Seek honest music. For honest songs are remembered long after perfect performances are forgotten. And should life ever leave small cracks within your heart, do not hide them. Treat them gently. For every repaired place becomes another doorway through which kindness may enter. If this violin ever helps even one lonely soul smile again, then every hour spent building it will have been worthwhile. Play softly, listen deeply, and leave every heart a little lighter than you found it. Gabriel lowered the letter slowly. Neither he nor Ethan spoke. The words seemed too beautiful to interrupt. After a long moment, Gabriel carefully folded the paper once more. Then, instead of placing it back inside the violin, he handed it to Ethan. Ethan looked startled. Shouldn't it stay with the instrument? Gabriel smiled. The violin already knows these words. He gently touched Ethan's journal resting inside the backpack. But I think a traveler may need them more. Ethan accepted the letter with both hands, as though receiving something far greater than paper. Very carefully, he tucked it between the pages of his journal, beside the sprig of lavender grace had given him, beside every lesson gathered along the road. Outside, the afternoon breeze carried another gentle violin note across the valley. It felt different now, not like an invitation, but like a promise. And somewhere deep inside Ethan, he sensed that the violin waiting near the highest window had not yet revealed its greatest secret. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 11. The Secret Behind the Waiting Violin. The afternoon sunlight slowly drifted across the workshop floor. Dust motes floated peacefully through the warm, golden beams. Everything felt wonderfully still. The folded letter now rested safely inside Ethan's journal, between the dried lavender blossom and the cedar bookmark engraved with the words, "Walk gently, listen deeply." He gently closed the journal. For a moment, he simply rested his hand upon its cover. Some pages held stories. Others held quiet pieces of people's hearts. Gabriel carefully returned the beautiful violin to his workbench, not to its hook. This time, it remained within reach, as though the old craftsman had finally decided. Its season of waiting was drawing near. Willow wandered inside from the garden. She leaped gracefully onto a nearby windowsill, curled into a patch of sunlight, and immediately fell asleep. Gabriel smiled. She always knows when an important conversation is about to begin. Ethan looked toward the waiting violin. "You said earlier that every instrument carries its own story." Gabriel nodded. "They do. And this one," he rested both hands gently upon the polished maple, "has carried 3 generations." Outside, the orchard whispered beneath the afternoon breeze. Inside, only the quiet ticking of an old wooden clock could be heard. Gabriel slowly pulled 2 chairs beside the open window. He invited Ethan to sit, then poured fresh mint tea into 2 small cups. As always, nothing began in haste. After a long, peaceful sip, the old craftsman smiled. "My grandfather built this violin. He was the finest violin maker our valley had ever known. He spent nearly 2 years choosing its wood, not because the first pieces were poor, but because he believed every tree already knew what kind of song it wished to become." Ethan listened carefully. Gabriel continued. "The spruce came from a lonely mountain where winter winds sang through the forest. The maple grew beside a quiet river that never rushed. When the 2 finally became one instrument, my grandfather said, 'Now the mountain has learned gentleness, and the river has learned courage.'" The words settled softly between them. Ethan imagined the forests, the river, the patient hands that had shaped the wood, perhaps long before a violin ever sang. Nature had already written its first melody. Gabriel looked lovingly toward the instrument. "My father inherited it, but he almost never played it." Ethan looked surprised. "Why not?" The old craftsman smiled thoughtfully. He believed some things should not belong to one person. So instead, he lent it whenever someone needed hope. The afternoon breeze lifted the lace curtain beside the window. It danced gently before settling once again. Gabriel's eyes grew distant with memory. "I remember a young soldier. He came here before leaving for a distant war. He was frightened. He tried very hard not to show it. My father handed him this violin. They played together until sunset. The next morning, the young man left. He never returned." Gabriel paused, not because the memory hurt, but because it deserved silence. A few months later, we received a letter. The soldier had written, "For one evening, I forgot to be afraid." Ethan lowered his eyes. Sometimes, one peaceful hour changed an entire lifetime. Gabriel smiled again. Years later, a little girl lost her ability to speak after a terrible illness. The doctors were kind. The family waited patiently, but words never came. My father visited every week. He never asked her to talk. He simply played this violin beneath her favorite apple tree. "What happened?" Ethan whispered. Gabriel's smile became wonderfully gentle. One spring morning, the little girl quietly began humming. Not speaking, humming. The melody came first. The words followed months later. Outside, a robin landed upon the windowsill. It sang a cheerful greeting. Gabriel answered with a warm smile. "You see," he said softly, "sometimes healing chooses music before language." The workshop became peaceful once again. Ethan looked toward the violin. Its polished surface reflected the afternoon light. For a brief moment, it almost seemed alive, not because of magic, but because so many hearts had trusted it with their stories. "So why?" Ethan asked quietly. "Did your father hide the letter inside?" Gabriel leaned back thoughtfully. "He told me, one day, someone will arrive who understands that instruments are not treasures because they are valuable. They are treasures because they help people become kindred." He smiled toward Ethan. "I've spent many years wondering who that person might be." Ethan gently shook his head. "I don't think it's me." Gabriel chuckled warmly. "The people most ready for responsibility are usually the ones who never assume it belongs to them." The old craftsman carefully lifted the waiting violin. He placed it into Ethan's hands. The instrument felt surprisingly light. Its smooth maple carried the warmth of the afternoon sun. Ethan held it carefully, almost reverently. He expected something extraordinary, a sudden feeling, a mysterious sign. Instead, he noticed only one simple thing: peace, a deep, quiet, unexpected peace. Gabriel watched him with kind eyes, then smiled. "I was right." Ethan looked up. "About what?" The old violin maker gazed toward the distant hills beyond the orchard. "The violin," he whispered, "has finally stopped waiting." To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 12. The Gift No One Expected. The workshop grew wonderfully quiet. Ethan continued holding the violin, not as someone who had been given a possession, but as someone who had been entrusted with a story. The afternoon sunlight rested gently upon the polished maple. Its golden surface reflected tiny patterns across the wooden floor. Outside, the orchard breathed peacefully beneath the soft breeze. Inside, even the old clock seemed to tick more slowly. Gabriel did not interrupt the silence. He had learned long ago that some moments needed room to settle inside the heart. After a while, Ethan carefully returned the violin. His hands were gentle, almost reluctant to let it go. The old craftsman accepted it with a warm smile. "What did you feel?" he asked quietly. Ethan searched for the right words. "It wasn't excitement." Gabriel nodded. "No, it wasn't surprise either." Again, Gabriel smiled. "What was it?" Ethan looked toward the open window. The apple trees swayed peacefully. Birdsong drifted through the warm afternoon. Finally, he answered. "It felt like coming home, to a place I've never been." The old violin maker's eyes shone kindly. "That," he whispered, "is one of the rarest feelings in life." Willow stretched lazily on the windowsill. She opened one eye toward Ethan. "Heard once, then drifted peacefully back to sleep. Gabriel chuckled. She approves. Both of them laughed softly. The laughter blended naturally with the quiet afternoon. Then, Gabriel carefully placed the violin inside its velvet-lined case. He did not close the lid. Instead, he rested one hand upon the edge. My grandfather once told me, never decide where a gift belongs until the gift tells you itself. Ethan looked puzzled. Can a gift really do that? Gabriel smiled. Not with words, with peace. The breeze wandered through the workshop. The hanging violins gave the faintest whisper, almost like leaves greeting the wind. The old craftsman slowly walked toward one of the highest shelves. There, resting beside a row of small cedar boxes, sat an old leather travel case. Its corners were worn smooth by countless journeys. Gabriel carefully lifted it down. I haven't opened this, he said thoughtfully. For many years. The brass clasps clicked softly. Inside rested several neatly folded items. A faded map of distant valleys. A small compass made of polished brass. An old sketchbook filled with drawings of violins. And beneath them all, a tiny linen pouch tied with blue ribbon. Gabriel untied the ribbon. Inside lay a smooth piece of maple wood, no larger than Ethan's palm. Its surface had never been carved, never shaped, simply preserved. My grandfather gave me this, Gabriel said. He told me, never throw away a beautiful piece of wood. One day, someone's story may be waiting inside it. He placed the maple piece into Ethan's hands. It felt surprisingly warm, almost as though it had quietly absorbed years of sunlight. This, Gabriel continued, is not for building a violin. Ethan looked up. It isn't. Gabriel shook his head. No, it's for remembering. He gently traced the natural grain running through the wood. Every tree grows one ring at a time. It never tries to become tomorrow before finishing today. He smiled kindly. I think people sometimes forget that. Ethan slowly turned the maple in his hands. Each line, each curve, had been shaped by seasons. Not by hurry, not by force, only by time. Outside, clouds drifted peacefully across the blue sky. Their shadows wandered lazily through the orchards. The afternoon seemed unwilling to end. Just then, a familiar sound echoed from the distant village. Ding, ding, ding. A small church bell. Its voice floated gently across the valley. Gabriel closed his eyes for a brief moment. They're gathering, he said, for the evening of songs. Ethan tilted his head. The evening of songs. Gabriel nodded. Every month. The people of the valley gather beneath the oldest apple tree. They don't come to perform. They come to remember. What do they remember? Gabriel smiled. Who helped them? Who encouraged them? Who walked beside them? No speeches. No prizes. Only music. Ethan's eyes brightened. May I come? The old craftsman looked almost surprised. I was hoping you'd ask. He carefully closed the travel case, then looked once more toward the waiting violin. It has waited many years. He whispered, I have a feeling. Its next chapter begins tonight. The afternoon breeze gently lifted the lace curtain once more. The waiting violin rested quietly inside its open case. No longer lonely. No longer waiting in silence. Some gifts were never meant to stay on a shelf. They were meant to continue traveling from one grateful heart to another, to be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 13, The Evening of Songs. The afternoon slowly surrendered to evening. Golden sunlight softened into warm amber. Long shadows stretched peacefully across the orchards. The valley seemed to breathe more slowly, as though preparing for something quietly beautiful. Gabriel buttoned his old linen coat. Its pockets were worn from many years of careful use. Before leaving the workshop, he walked past each violin resting upon the shelves, not inspecting them, simply offering a gentle glance, almost like wishing old friends a peaceful evening. Finally, he stopped before the violin that had waited for so many years. He carefully lifted it from its velvet-lined case. The polished maple reflected the fading sunlight. For a moment, Gabriel closed his eyes, then smiled. "I think," he whispered softly. "It's time." He slipped the violin into its weathered leather case. Not with ceremony, not with sadness, only with quiet gratitude. Ethan noticed something. "You've never taken it to the gathering before?" Gabriel shook his head. "Never. Why tonight?" The old craftsman looked toward the orchard path. "Because some evenings know exactly what they are waiting for." The answer felt complete. No further explanation seemed necessary. Willow stretched gracefully across the workshop floor. She wandered toward the open doorway. As Gabriel reached for the handle, the little gray cat stepped outside first, as though proudly leading the way. Ethan laughed quietly. "I believe she's our guide." Gabriel smiled. She often believes the same. Together, they followed the winding orchard path toward the great apple tree. The air had become wonderfully cool. The fragrance of lavender and fresh apples drifted through the valley. Fireflies had already begun appearing beneath the hedgerows. Tiny lanterns, floating peacefully above the grass. The village slowly came alive, not with noise, but with kindness. Neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles. Children carried small woven baskets filled with fresh bread. Older couples walked hand in hand. Several people brought blankets woven in gentle shades of blue and green. No one hurried. Everyone seemed to understand that beautiful evenings should never be rushed. As Ethan walked beside Gabriel, many villagers smiled and nodded respectfully. No grand greetings, no loud voices, simply quiet recognition. An elderly baker offered Gabriel a small loaf wrapped in linen. For later, he said warmly. Gabriel accepted it with both hands. "Thank you, Samuel." A young girl ran over carrying a tiny bouquet of white daisies. Without saying a word, she placed them into Ethan's hands, then skipped happily back to her parents. Ethan smiled. "I don't think we've met." Gabriel chuckled. Kindness rarely waits for introductions. The path gradually opened into the familiar meadow. The great apple tree stood proudly beneath the evening sky. Its branches reached outward like welcoming arms. Hundreds of ribbons fluttered gently among the leaves. Now, tiny glass lanterns hung beside them. Their soft golden lights glowed like peaceful stars. Blankets had been spread across the grass. Families gathered quietly. Some spoke in whispers. Others simply watched the sunset together. Near the trunk of the ancient tree stood a small wooden platform. No decorations, no grand stage, only a simple chair, a music stand, and enough room for a single musician. Ethan looked around. No audience seats. Gabriel smiled. Everyone sits wherever the grass feels comfortable. Oliver waved excitedly from beside Eleanor. His little violin rested safely across his lap. Eleanor smiled warmly. "You came. I wouldn't have missed it," Ethan replied. Nearby, Mr. Alden stood speaking with several neighbors. When he noticed Gabriel, he tipped his straw hat once again. "I see you brought an old friend." His eyes rested upon the leather violin case. Gabriel nodded quietly. "Yes, I think it wished to hear tonight's songs." The church bell echoed gently across the valley. 1, 2, 3. The conversations slowly faded, not because anyone asked for silence, but because silence arrived naturally. An elderly woman carrying a small candle stepped toward the center beneath the apple tree. She lit a larger lantern hanging from one low branch. Its gentle flame flickered warmly beneath the evening sky. She smiled kindly at everyone gathered, then simply said, "Thank you for bringing your grateful hearts." Nothing more. No speech. No announcements. The lantern glowed softly among the ribbons. One by one, people quietly stood. Some shared a simple memory. Others spoke only a single name. A father thanked the teacher who had patiently helped his daughter learn to read. A young gardener remembered the neighbor who had replanted an orchard after a terrible storm. A grandmother smiled through gentle tears as she thanked the midwife who had delivered 3 generations of her family. After each remembrance, someone played a short melody, sometimes on a violin, sometimes on a wooden flute, sometimes only a humming voice carried by the breeze. No applause followed, only peaceful silence, the kind that honored every story. Ethan felt his heart growing wonderfully still. He had never attended a gathering quite like this. Here, people did not celebrate achievements. They celebrated kindness. Gabriel quietly leaned toward him. "This," he whispered, "is the richest village I have ever known." Ethan looked around. The cottages were simple. The clothes were modest. The blankets were carefully mended. Nothing suggested great wealth. Gabriel noticed his thoughtful expression, then smiled gently. Not rich in gold, rich in gratitude. Above them, the first evening star appeared. The ribbons beneath the ancient apple tree danced softly in the breeze. And resting beside Gabriel's chair, the waiting violin remained peacefully inside its leather case, as though it knew its own story was almost ready to be shared. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 14. The violin chooses its keeper. Evening settled gently across the valley. The first stars shimmered above the ancient apple tree. Their quiet light mingled with the tiny glass lanterns hanging among the branches. Golden flames flickered softly. The ribbons whispered in the cool breeze. One by one, the villagers shared their stories. No story lasted very long. A few gentle words, a grateful smile, a quiet melody, then peaceful silence once again. Ethan noticed something beautiful. Every person who stepped forward spoke less about themselves and more about someone who had changed their life. No one asked for recognition. No one expected applause. Gratitude was enough. Oliver stood next. His little violin rested carefully beneath his chin. He looked nervous. Then he saw Gabriel smiling. Eleanor nodded encouragingly. Ethan placed a hand over his heart. The young boy smiled back. He took one slow breath, then spoke. "I would like to thank the person who taught me. That one wrong note doesn't end a song." He looked toward Gabriel. "Thank you. The old violin maker lowered his eyes humbly, as though receiving such gratitude was something sacred. Oliver lifted his bow. A simple melody floated into the evening air. It wasn't long, only a few gentle phrases, but every note carried quiet courage. When the melody ended, silence wrapped itself around the gathering. Not empty silence, grateful silence. Oliver returned to his blanket. His smile shone brighter than any lantern. Gabriel leaned toward Ethan. "Do you remember what he believed this morning?" Ethan nodded. He thought his music was gone. And now, Gabriel smiled. "He knows where to find it." The old craftsman slowly stood. The meadow grew wonderfully still. No one called his name. No one announced him. They simply watched, because they knew his turn had come. Gabriel carried the weathered leather violin case to the little wooden platform beneath the apple tree. The lantern above him glowed warmly. The breeze gently stirred his silver hair. He rested the case upon the chair. For a long moment, he did nothing. Then, very slowly, he opened it. The beautiful violin reflected the lantern light like still amber. Several villagers quietly smiled. Some had seen it before. Many had not. A little girl whispered to her father, "Is that the waiting violin?" Her father nodded softly. "Yes, the one no one could buy." Gabriel carefully lifted the instrument. He looked across every peaceful face gathered beneath the tree. Then he spoke. "My grandfather built this violin. My father protected it. And for many years, I believe my task was simply to keep it safe." He paused, looking lovingly at the polished maple. "But today, I realized something." He smiled. "A violin is never truly safe until it is helping someone." The breeze wandered gently through the ribbons overhead. Gabriel raised the violin beneath his chin. He played. The first note floated across the valley like moonlight upon quiet water. Warm, gentle, deeply familiar. No one moved. Children rested quietly beside their parents. Even the smallest among them seemed unwilling to disturb the melody. The music carried no sadness, yet it understood sorrow. It carried no excitement, yet it welcomed joy. It simply told the truth that every heart, no matter how carefully hidden, longed to be understood. Ethan closed his eyes. He remembered the lighthouse, the sea, Grace's lavender, Sophie's paper boat, Captain circling above the cliffs, the old blue gate, every gentle lesson that had brought him here. Without realizing it, he smiled. The final note slowly disappeared into the peaceful night. Gabriel lowered the violin. He remained silent for several moments. Then, he stepped down from the little platform, carrying the violin with both hands. Not toward the workshop, not toward his chair, toward Ethan. The villagers watched quietly. No one seemed surprised. Almost as though they had somehow expected this evening long before it arrived. Gabriel stopped before Ethan. He held out the violin. "This instrument," he said softly, "has been waiting." Ethan looked at him in astonishment. I can't accept this." Gabriel smiled warmly. "I know, and that," he whispered, "is exactly why it belongs with you." Ethan looked down at the violin, then back at Gabriel. "But it's your family's treasure." Gabriel gently shook his head. "No, it has always belonged to the next journey." The old craftsman carefully placed the violin into Ethan's hands. Its polished wood felt warm, not from the evening air, but from every heart that had carried it before. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Gabriel reached into the violin case. From a small hidden compartment beneath the velvet lining, he removed a tiny silver tuning fork. Its surface had been engraved with delicate words. "Find the note that brings peace." He placed it beside the violin. "My grandfather used this. My father carried it. Now, I think your road has need of it." Ethan's eyes filled with quiet tears, not because he had received a priceless instrument, but because someone believed he would carry its story with kindness. Above the ancient apple tree, the lanterns glowed softly beneath the stars. The ribbons danced in the night breeze. And somewhere beyond the sleeping orchards, a lone skylark offered one final evening song, as if the valley itself had quietly witnessed the choosing of its next keeper. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 15. The Melody That Continued the Journey. The little silver tuning fork rested quietly beside the violin. Its delicate engraving caught the warm lantern light. "Find the note that brings peace." Ethan traced the tiny words with his fingertips. He felt their meaning long before he fully understood them. Around the ancient apple tree, the evening of songs continued. No one seemed eager to leave. Children rested sleepily against their parents. Neighbors shared fresh bread. Warm apple tea was poured into waiting cups. The night had become wonderfully calm. Above, the stars quietly multiplied across the velvet sky. The moon rose slowly beyond the eastern hills. Its gentle silver light settled across the orchards. The ribbons fluttered softly beneath its glow. Gabriel looked around the gathering with peaceful eyes. "This valley," he whispered, "has taught me something every year." Ethan smiled. "What is that?" The old violin maker folded his hands. "People often believe kindness must be remembered through monuments." He looked toward the great apple tree. "I think it is remembered through people." The words lingered gently in the cool night air. Nearby, Mr. Alden quietly approached carrying a small wooden box. It was beautifully crafted from polished walnut. Tiny carvings of apple blossoms decorated the lid. Without speaking, he offered it to Ethan. "For your travels." Ethan accepted it carefully. "You made this?" Mr. Alden nodded. "Many winters ago, I always felt it was waiting for someone." Ethan slowly opened the lid. Inside, a soft piece of blue linen rested upon the bottom, perfectly shaped, to protect the violin during long journeys. Gabriel smiled knowingly. "It seems the valley has been preparing for you longer than either of us realized." Ethan gently placed the violin inside the box. It fit perfectly, not too tightly, not too loosely, as though it had quietly found its home. Oliver walked over carrying something behind his back. He looked shy again, but this time it was the happy kind of shyness. "I made something," he said. From behind him, he revealed a tiny music notebook. Its cover had been stitched together by hand. Several pages inside were still blank. Only the first page held neat handwriting. It read, "Songs shared along the road." Oliver smiled. "So whenever someone teaches you a new song, you won't forget it." Ethan carefully turned the first page. At the bottom, Oliver had written one simple sentence: "Every song becomes brighter when shared." Ethan looked at the young boy. "I'll treasure this." Oliver beamed with pride. Eleanor stepped forward next. She untied the pale blue ribbon from her shawl. It was faded from many years of faithful use. She gently wrapped it around the handle of the violin case. "So you'll remember," she said softly, "that healing is never something we keep. It's something we pass on." The blue ribbon fluttered gently in the evening breeze. Grace's lavender, Sophie's paper bow, Captain's white feather, the cedar bookmark, the silver tuning fork, Oliver's notebook, Eleanor's ribbon, each gift, small on its own, yet together, they quietly told the story of every heart Ethan had met. Gabriel looked toward the ancient apple tree, then toward Ethan. "I have one last request." "Anything." Gabriel smiled. "When you someday meet another traveler whose heart has forgotten its own song, don't tell them they must become stronger. Sit beside them. Listen if words are needed. Offer them gently. If silence is needed, honor it. And if music is needed." He rested one hand upon the violin case. "Let this old friend do what it has always done." Ethan nodded slowly. "I promise." The old craftsman looked wonderfully content. The promise was enough. The lantern beneath the apple tree flickered softly. One by one, the villagers began walking home beneath the stars. There were no loud farewells, only warm smiles, quiet waves, soft footsteps disappearing along familiar orchard paths. Mr. Alden tipped his straw hat. "Safe travels." Oliver hugged Ethan tightly. "When you come back, I'll know more songs. I'm looking forward to hearing them." Eleanor gently squeezed his hand. "Thank you for arriving exactly when you did." Ethan smiled. "I think I arrived because all of you were already here." Gabriel laughed quietly. A traveler always says something like that. Willow the gray cat wandered over one final time. She brushed against Ethan's boots, then looked up with sleepy green eyes. After a contented purr, she returned to the workshop without looking back, as though she already trusted the road would take care of its newest traveler. The meadow slowly grew quiet. Only Ethan and Gabriel remained beneath the ancient apple tree. Neither wished to hurry the goodbye. Some friendships needed one last peaceful silence. Above them, the stars shone with quiet certainty, and somewhere beyond the hills, another journey was already waiting, patiently, kindly, ready to welcome the traveler who now carried not only a backpack filled with treasured keepsakes, but also a violin whose song had finally found its road. To be continued. Episode 11. The Violin Maker Who Repaired Broken Songs. Part 16. Finale. Morning arrived quietly over the valley of apple trees. The first golden rays of sunlight rested gently upon the ancient orchard. Tiny drops of dew shimmered like scattered pearls across the grass. The ribbons beneath the great apple tree stirred softly in the cool breeze. Blue, silver, golden, white. Each one carried a story. Each one remembered a grateful heart. Ethan stood at the edge of the meadow. His backpack rested comfortably on his shoulders. Inside, the quiet treasures from every journey traveled safely with him. The smooth river stone, the white seashell, the pressed lavender blossom, the tiny wooden windmill, the bottle of spring water, the cedar bookmark engraved with. Walk gently, listen deeply, the bronze key of quiet hearts, the morning bell, the silver bell bracelet, the golden ribbon, the wooden tree token, the journey bundle, the wildflower seed, the compass that pointed toward kindness, the blue sea glass, the amber sea glass, the bottle of white sand, Sophie's little paper boat, Captain's white feather, the silver compass that pointed to the center, Grace's fresh lavender, the letter hidden inside the waiting violin, the smooth piece of maple wood, Oliver's little notebook, the tiny silver tuning fork engraved with. Find the note that brings peace. And now, resting safely inside Mr. Alden's walnut travel case, the violin that had waited 3 generations to continue its song. None of these treasures were valuable because they were rare. They were valuable because each one carried a lesson. Lessons could not be weighed, or bought, or hurried. They could only be lived. Gabriel, Eleanor, Oliver, Mr. Alden, and Willow walked beside Ethan toward the old orchard gate. The path was lined with blooming lavender and white daisies. Birdsong floated gently through the morning air. No one tried to make the farewell shorter or easier. Some goodbyes deserved their own quiet pace. Oliver stepped forward first. He smiled brightly. The next time we meet, I'll play you a new song. Ethan smiled. And I'll bring you one from another village. Oliver laughed happily. It's a promise. They gently shook hands, not as strangers, but as fellow musicians whose friendship had only just begun. Eleanor untied a single white apple blossom from the ribbon woven into her basket. She carefully tucked it inside Ethan's notebook. So you'll remember that every spring begins after a quiet winter. Ethan nodded gratefully. I'll never forget. Mr. Alden reached into his coat pocket. From it, he produced the tiny wooden bird he had carved. I made another one last night. He said with a gentle smile, this one isn't for a shelf. He placed it into Ethan's hand. When the road feels long, set it somewhere nearby. It has a habit of reminding people that even small wings can carry hope. Ethan carefully tucked the little bird into his backpack. Thank you. Gabriel stood quietly beside the orchard gate. The old violin maker held no gift, no package, only his familiar warm smile. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. At last, Gabriel rested one hand over his heart. My grandfather left me one final piece of wisdom. He said softly, I've been saving it. Ethan listened. The morning breeze gently stirred the apple branches overhead. Gabriel spoke slowly, clearly, each word finding its own peaceful place. May your hands never become so busy that they forget how to comfort. May your ears never become so full of noise that they stop hearing quiet hearts. May every song you carry leave the world a little gentler than it found it. And whenever your own melody grows faint, be still, for peace always remembers the way back home. Silence followed, not because there was nothing left to say, but because every heart present already understood. Willow wandered over one last time. She rubbed gently against Ethan's boots, then sat beside Gabriel, as though appointing herself guardian of the workshop once more. Ethan smiled. I think she'll miss me. Gabriel chuckled. Perhaps, but she'll be busy welcoming the next traveler. Far above, a robin landed upon the highest branch of the ancient apple tree. It sang 3 bright notes. 1 for gratitude, 1 for courage, and 1 for every melody still waiting to be discovered. Ethan looked around the valley one final time. The little workshop stood peacefully among the apple trees. The fountain continued its gentle song. The glass lanterns still swayed beneath the ancient branches. Nothing asked to be remembered, yet everything would be. He carefully lifted the walnut travel case, adjusted the straps of his backpack, then stepped through the old orchard gate. The road curved gently between golden fields before disappearing into distant rolling hills. The morning breeze carried a sound unlike anything he had heard before. Not waves, not bells, not violins. It was laughter, children's laughter, light, joyful, carried from somewhere far beyond the hills. Ethan paused, closed his eyes, and listened. A peaceful smile appeared upon his face. Some journeys begin with footsteps. Others begin with a single note. And sometimes, the most beautiful journeys begin with laughter waiting to become a song. He opened his eyes, adjusted the violin case resting comfortably at his side, and continued walking toward the distant laughter. The valley slowly disappeared behind him, its melodies, its kindness, its quiet wisdom, traveling forward, inside one grateful heart. To be continued. Next journey, Episode 12, The Clockmaker Who Collected Forgotten Hours. Time cannot truly be lost, but moments of kindness can make even an ordinary hour feel eternal. Thank you for walking beside Ethan once again. May you remember that every heart carries its own melody. Every silence has something gentle to say, and every act of kindness continues long after the final note has faded. Until our next journey, walk gently, listen deeply, and wherever life leads you, leave behind a song that helps someone smile. Asterisk, asterisk.